Okay, welcome back to What If History Restarted. This is episode 66, and last time there's some general events around the world, but we also importantly saw this weird stuff going on in the Mediterranean with the boat paths and the unidentified ships. So, yeah. Anyway, though, we're gonna pick off from there. And we're gonna go over here to Oman, whose little, sort of colonial empire is starting to fail. If you look on their religion map, you can see that their religion only encompasses their territory and this one, plus this country and a little bit of this country. So, the Persian coast, as well as this whole Indian Pakistani area, is not their ethnicity. So these areas are a little bit more rebellious, especially this one. And they all, thankfully, I cannot speak today, but thankfully for Oman, the one that's more rebellious is the one they care about less, because over here the Persian coast is the richest area in the world, so they're definitely happy that they have that. But over here we are going to start to see some rebellions, such as, if we see this whole area is the Lime religion, so we're going to see some of these outskirty areas rebel because they want to join up with their neighbors. And so we have a little rebellion starting over in this corner, and it's probably funded by the Trapezoid Alliance, so that's not great for these guys. But yeah, it starts to grow. And eventually, Omani troops arrive and kind of start beating it back. However, they have a lot of support behind them, so it's pretty difficult to actually get them all the way out. And so eventually the war just kind of stalemates, and Oman agrees to let some of these areas go. So we're going to see some new borders get created as this greenish sort of country. We'll get all of this, except for up here, because this country will get a little sliver right there. But the main country getting land really is going to be this purple country. It gets a nice chunk of this northern area, coming all the way in like that. So yeah. And also, this one's kind of weird, but in the peace deal, this little area up here manages to just wiggle their way out of Oman and join up with these guys, even though they didn't rebel, and these guys weren't supporting any rebellion, but it worked. So now Oman's colony over here is looking a little bit smaller, and yeah, they're now 47,000 pixels. And you know who's the biggest country? This is 239,000, 241,000, 240,000, 263,000, 161,000, 61,000. So I guess it would probably be this northern Canadian country. I mean, unless you count Antarctica, but I don't think you should. So yeah, this is the biggest country in the world, at least according to the map projection. Although now that I think about it, it's probably wrong because, projections, the north is bigger than it is. So, but going off of pixels, this is the biggest country. Anyway, away from that, we're going to be looking down here to Africa. These countries are fairly new. They recently got independence from some colonial empire. I kind of forget which one, though. It was probably Korea or China or something. But anyway, some of these countries are not very stable. And I guess not very stable wouldn't be the right word, because they are stable, but they're a little bit not well defined, I guess you could say. Because if you look, they are all the same religion. Well, I guess this northern one technically is a little bit in the red religion, but that's fine. But yeah, they're all, and this one also is a little bit not in the yellow. They have a little bit of the Horn of Africa one. But even though they are mostly all the same religion, there is a lot of subsets of that religion that are just too minor to show on the map. Some of them don't align very well with countries. We might see one that's just use this color. You might see one that looks something like this and is used for this country. So, it's not very well defined, and it's kind of off from its actual country. So a lot of that is leading to ethnic tensions, and pretty quickly it's going to lead to war, because as we just saw, there's a lot of people from this country that are up here, and so they're going to go ahead and start invading this country. Now, obviously, this looks kind of stupid because this country is way bigger, but it's actually not that much stronger. I mean, it is stronger, but it's not by that much. And while that still would be stupid for this country to invade, they do have support from this green country, because as I mentioned, there is some of the red religion stuck up here. And that's like if there was a major northern population of like British settlers over in like a Eswatini or something, I don't know. But anyway, these two countries are now going to start pushing in here, and that's pretty good for them. And things look like they're going pretty well until eventually things can't be going well, because now these guys are going to want some of their ethnicity, and they're going to start invading this team. So that's not good. These guys have to redirect some of their troops, so goodbye to some of this front line. With that, though, they do kind of stabilize this front line down here. Over here, the green country is just kind of stalemated in here, so they're just going to take this and go. We can make that border look nicer in a second. And as for this country, as for these three countries, we're going to see that this also just kind of stalemates until this blue country is going to join in on the war and start invading this country. And from there, it stalemates once again. And now we can look at the actual peace treaty. So this country will be shifting a little bit to the north, basically, as they gain this, but lose this. Oh, I don't like that. Bam. Bam. And then this country will just be gaining their southern little thing here. And I did say we'd make this border look nicer, so let's do that. I should probably figure out where the yellow is. Bam. So, like, they would. Oh, wait. Bam. Okay, bear with me. Yeah. There we go. And now just to make it look nicer, it would be something like. And huzzah. And cha. So that's as close as they're going to get, really, because any further war over the tiny bits of people that are slightly on the other border would be kind of stupid. This country's borders are looking kind of weird now, but that's fine. Also, they're kind of like Ethiopia, because they are in Ethiopia's position, and they're also just barely landlocked. So that's upsetting for them. Anyway, moving away from this area of the world, we're going to turn our focus probably over to the Americas, and over to these two competitive alliances. And things are going interesting right now, because up here, if you remember, we have the Prairie Country and Canada / New England. Two of them are kind of at each other's throats on their border, right here. So, they got troops lined up both sides, and so that's a little bit worrying, but it's also kind of good for these guys, because they're, like, both trying to get one of these two countries on their side. I would assume they're probably both going after Canada / New England, because they are probably almost definitely the stronger one, as compared to this purple Prairie Country. So they're both of these alliances are trying to recruit this country. These guys don't really want to join either side, though. But over here, these guys are a little bit less keen on neutrality, and they're actually willing to join one of the teams. The only issue is that to these teams, what they think is that if they accept this country in, then they're pretty much guaranteeing that the stronger one will join the other alliance. So nobody actually wants these guys now. So poor little them. There's a sad face on them. So that's not very nice to this country. And these guys are even going to consider making their own alliance. And while it gets surprisingly far before everyone starts to realize that literally they have no allies. Like, they hate this country. These guys don't really care about them. You know, all the already aligned countries don't really care about them. California doesn't like them. North California doesn't like them. The native country really hates them. Alaska is kind of neutral on them, but probably slightly positive. However, they're already in the Octagon Alliance, and they probably wouldn't want to bother joining this country's alliance because it would have no benefit for them, really. So, yeah, these guys are kind of just alone here. But eventually, they're just gonna be fed up with this, and after a few more border skirmishes, they're going to start invading the Canadian area. And so they go ahead and take these two lakes before meeting up with Hudson Bay. And then they widen this all the way out like so. As for this Canadian country, obviously this is kind of far away from its population center. That is a loud truck. But, yeah, it's kind of far away from their population center. However, they already had a lot of troops stationed here, so thankfully it doesn't take them too long to react. They isolate a lot of these troops over here and reconnect up like this. Meanwhile, the prairie country kind of does this. Bam. Alaska is considering what to do. They could invade the prairie country, they could invade Canada. They are, like I said, slightly positive towards the prairie country, and actually probably slightly negative due to competition over here with Canada / New England. And so they're considering invading Canada. However, that would be a very costly war, and unlike these two guys, they do not have any troops over here. So, sending a whole bunch of troops all the way across Canada probably isn't going to be too fun. So that's why they're going to eventually say that they are not joining in on the war. Also, since these guys are at war, they now kind of can't join any of these alliances for the time being. So, yeah. Anyway, the prairie country is going to sort of thicken out here. And the war kind of starts to stalemate as we enter winter. However, this little pocket over here is finally squished out. And then, after winter passes, we can see fighting start to pop up again. And now the prairie country is kind of losing land over here. And we see that New England / Canada will begin their first offensive into the prairie country. The prairie country will kind of secure a lot more of the Alaskan border because that's just more trade with Alaska, and there's a good amount of natural resources up here. So they have this weird panhandle going all the way up to this lake, and then they take a rest there because, it's pretty tiring. Also, these islands in the middle of this lake over in Alaska are still owned by Denmark, and I think that's kind of funny, so we're going to keep it. Anyway, New England / Canada is now tearing through the prairie country, moving all the way through like this. However, the people of the prairie country are very nationalistic, so fighting through their actual territory is very difficult because, literally every civilian is, in some way supporting a militia, even if they're not actually joining it. They're donating to it and feeding the soldiers. So, yeah. Anyway, the prairie country starts doing this, and we can kind of see a very, clear front line start to form. It's pretty much just this, obviously this little area, panhandle thing being the exception, but yeah. And eventually these guys are all very tired of fighting and calling for an end to the war. However, these two countries really hate each other and really do not want the other one to win, so they're both going to carry on. The New England / Canada country will tear all the way through to the border of this lake, which I do not know the name of. I probably should. I probably would recognize it if I heard it, but oh well. But yeah, they get all the way to the edge of this lake. They do not cross it, though. Meanwhile, the prairie, well, they do not do that. The prairie country kind of cuts across here and gets all of this back. They do not go over here, though. And they also secure some more northern land. They're probably done with the north now, because at this point, that's just not worth it. So they turn back down south. However, by now, the people in both countries are getting kind of rowdy, and, minor rebellions are starting to form up. And so, eventually, that is going to kind of force an end to the war, where these two guys are going to have to work out a peace treaty. So as you could see from the front lines, the border will probably be roughly following that. So first of all, the Canadian / New England country is going to get pushed out all the way to this lake border thing. This is the new border. That's what I'm trying to say. It comes all the way down here to the Lake of the Woods. I do know the name of that one. Like so. As for the prairie country, though, they're going an awful looking panhandle, which is going to be up north here. And I technically don't know that it's awful looking, but I can imagine that it's going to be awful looking. And, yeah, they cut across like this. And they definitely don't get all that, but they will get a good amount. Like this. A little bit of connection up there. So, yeah. That is now the border here, and as you can tell, it looks horrendous. It would be much better if the prairie country could, like, get some of Alaska, but, that's not happening, I guess, because, you know, slightly positive relations. So, you know, it'll get fixed sometime soon, but for now, you're just gonna have to sit through the border gore. Anyway, how long has it been? 16 minutes, we're about, like, 2/3 of the way through the video, so entering Act 3, I guess. Probably not a lot to talk about in the rest of the Americas. Everyone still is a little bit upset at Peru for, like, killing all the native people here. Everyone is still a little bit more appreciative of this country. You know, they used to hate this country, but this guy's actually been doing good to repair relations, and that's been made pretty easy since everyone now has a new enemy over here in Peru. Anyway. Also, I do want to quickly go back here just to mention that, you know, now the alliance issue is getting popped up again. Both these guys are now a little bit more considerative of joining the alliances. I mean, you know, the prairie country already was, but the New England / Canada one is definitely more considering joining an alliance. They don't really know which one they would join. They're probably leaning towards, the Pentagon Alliance, actually, because even if it is the weaker alliance, they are bordering 2 of its countries, and technically those are, and it only has a small border with a 3-star country, so if they were to get into a war, then, like, they wouldn't have to do too much direct invading, just supporting. And also, like, even though the Pentagon Alliance is weaker, it still is pretty close, and if they were to join it, then it would probably become stronger than the 3-star alliance. So, yeah. And obviously that would kind of make the prairie country want to join the 3-star alliance. However, they are also leaning towards the Pentagon alliance, so that's a little bit awkward. But, yeah. Anyway, there probably isn't much to go over in Europe other than the fact that Austria is continuing to get rich. There is still that little, you know, it's probably like a semi-autonomous area over here now. Let's actually just, like, kind of show that, map it out a little bit. So, yeah, this, like, little area over here is, like, a semi-autonomous region, probably, because these guys, like, were supposed to win their independence, and then they were planning to join up with Austria. However, Tuscany over here really is still very paranoid of Austria, even though they're much stronger now. I mean, look at the difference now. So because of that, they blocked these guys from joining, even though that was what they were supposed to do. So now they're a semi-autonomous region over in whatever you would call this. I don't actually know. Hungary, maybe? I mean, I guess, you know, if this is Austria, then that would make sense for this to be Hungary. Anyway, for probably end over here, we're going to be moving over to Asia, where we see a pretty simple event take place, but still just something that I felt like needed to happen, which is that Austria and Korea are going to officially reinstate an alliance between them. We're going to go with the Checkmark Alliance, yes. Actually, no, that looks stupid. We're going to go with the... There we have a pentagon. We're going to go with the Notched Arrow Alliance. It's going to be facing up. Okay, that's as good as we're going to get. And also, I don't like the notch, actually, so we're just going to make it the Up Arrow Alliance. And now, so in the peace treaty of World War I, these guys were kind of prohibited from making an alliance. However, it was more so you're not allowed to make like a big alliance like you had before with all the different powers. And so all these guys are really doing is just formally declaring their alliance between each other, which, I mean, obviously kind of was already known to be a thing. And, like, technically, Baikal would kind of have the basis to argue that they should be invaded now, because that's kind of what the peace treaty did say. Like, it's not exactly, but they could argue it. However, they've already tried to invade them, and that did not go too well. So, they're probably good on that. And, yeah, so that's just them officially declaring their alliance. And, yeah, Asia is very full of alliances now, other than this country, who is, well, there's a few countries, but you can see these guys are kind of just in the middle of everything, and they're still not in alliance, because they are very neutral. Anyway, though, we're gonna stick with alliance talk, everyone's favorite, because now we have an actually more important event being made, which is that, obviously economic alliances are like a little bit weaker, I guess, than military alliances. And now when I say weaker, I don't mean that they're like would win in a war less often, like, because like, obviously the economic star alliance would, or what's this, the cross economic alliance would definitely win against the military trapezoid alliance. However, when I say weaker, I just mean that these guys are a little bit like less likely to defend each other. And hold on a second. Okay, there we go. I just wanted to get into a more comfortable position. But as I was saying, the economic alliances are like a little bit weaker to say. And by that I mean that like they're less connected, like they're less aligned. I guess that doesn't really make sense, but like, these guys are all like very close with each other, and if like one was to get invaded, then they're all invading. Meanwhile, the economic alliances are just kind of like, we generally will support each other, probably. So that's not as strong as a military alliance. However, we're now going to see a pretty important event, which is probably going to be the final event of today's video, which is that over here, a little meeting will be held between all the members of the Cross Alliance over in Golden Horde's capital. And after this meeting is finished, a very important announcement is broadcasted, which is that the Cross Alliance will be officially converting from an economic alliance to a military alliance. So if we do this, blam, you can now see that the Cross Alliance is yellow, which now means that it's military. And this is pretty worrying, because honestly, World War I kind of started because of the two competing alliances, and now we kind of have these two competing alliances. And before, everyone was like, oh, well, they're not military alliances this time, so maybe it'll be fine. But now one of them is a military alliance. So now people are, talking about, oh no, this could be the new Great War, this could be World War II. But obviously Golden Horde assures everyone that no, they don't want to do this just because, to compete with these guys, the Octagon Economic Alliance. They're just doing this because they are closely related nations with shared histories and cultures or whatever, which is sort of true, but also like not really. Like Estonia over here isn't too closely related to this thing over in China. Actually, that's not even China. It's like, what is that? It's just like Central Asia, I guess. Really? I thought, Okay, but anyway, yeah. So, kind of sounds like a bunch of lies, and the Octagon Alliance is saying that it is, and they're being like, oh, we're poor little us. See, we could we could turn our alliance military, because then we would be competing with them, but we're not doing that because we're such good guys. So, see, we're the good guys and they're not. Everyone, you should join us instead. And the thing is, that actually kind of works, because over here, down in the south, we were seeing that a new member, this little East Indian country, is going to be joining them. So with that, we can now see that the border, that the Octagon Alliance has grown a little bit. Obviously that statement from the Octagon Alliance wasn't the only thing that convinced these guys to join. They were also just kind of scared of India and also Bangladesh. After all, Bangladesh did rule over them for like a very long time. And I believe they are different ethnicity from, yeah, they are different ethnicity from the rest of India. They are part of Bangladesh's ethnicity. So, yeah. And also on top of that, they also were a little bit freaked out by these guys becoming economic. They're like, oh, well, these guys are actually probably evil. So, if their opponents are, so they have opponents, so the evil person's opponents are probably the good people. So we're gonna join them. Also, because we're scared of these guys. So we can kind of see now, if we just like, I know this is gonna look weird, but like, if we just temporarily do this, and then this, also gotta remember these guys, and then bam, 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 and don't forget Alaska. So blam. We can now kind of see the, like, size of the military of the two alliances. So the Cross Alliance over here is 323,000 pixels. Meanwhile, these guys are massive. They are 623,000 pixels. Obviously, land size is not everything, because, a considerable amount of this is Siberia. And, like, even though a considerable amount of this is Siberia, too, you can kind of see from, like, where the cities stop. Like, these guys haven't developed all the way up to here. Like, this is their undeveloped area. Meanwhile, these guys, their cities stop, like, right, like, over here. So they have definitely more land that's not developed. And then it's also the same for Alaska over here, because, like, literally no one is up here. There's also, the Himalayas over here. So these guys do have a lot more, like, dead zones. These guys are pretty densely populated throughout. I mean, they're not that dense over here, but it still is populated. So the only real, like, empty area for them is Siberia. Meanwhile, these guys have more of Siberia, plus also the Himalayas and the Canadian wilderness. So, yeah, because of that, it's kind of roughly equal in terms of power, the two alliances. If they were to go to war right now, it'd probably be a stalemate after the very bloody, extremely bloody war. But, thankfully they are not going to war yet. But, yeah, let's just undo this, because obviously that is not, whoa. Oh, yep, there we go. Okay. But yeah, with that, we've seen a few major events happen today, mainly the Cross Alliance becoming a military alliance. But with that, that is going to be the end of the episode. So, bye.